Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. So far in early 2022, we've had $3 trillion in a wipeout in the stock market. Starting to see cracks in the economy, possible recession coming soon. Let's go ahead and get started. And a lot of lawsuits. Elon Musk is getting sued, Binance is getting sued, Coinbase, absolutely everybody's suing because of the crypto collapse. So we'll get into that as well. Overall for the week, markets in the US absolutely collapsed. On Thursday, it was the fourth largest sell program in history. Not the fourth day that dropped by the most, but the fourth day, let's say, that they were planning to sell. In the first quarter of this year, Americans lost $500 billion of wealth in 2022, basically the first quarter. And as I mentioned, we've had $3 trillion in the stock market wipeout. This is the beginning of the year. This isn't the last week where we saw these markets absolutely capitulate. Households have had, one of the things I think is really funny is when the government tries to kind of talk things out. You know, for example, the Putin price hike, the inflation is because of the war in Russia, when in reality from the election, I'll try to find that graph to be able to put it up here for you, but the inflation was very low, then Biden got in, then it exploded, and then, you know, all the way up here after we've seen all these cost rises, a little bit of a rise with Russia. And so they're saying that households have $2 trillion in excess savings due to the pandemic and everything else that's happened over the last few years. And if you guys don't remember, 70% of the economy is consumer spending. So you and I going out and spending new TVs and drinks and all kinds of stuff, services, that's 70% of the economy. So if we have $2 trillion in excess savings and the economy is about, you know, shooting just around number $20 trillion, we literally have about a 10% bump if everybody went out and just spent that money. But one of the things that they don't talk about is the $30 trillion in market losses that we've had over the last 6 months. So it's like they look at all the great things, but none of the negative things, which is, I think, is a bit ironic. European markets, far, far lower, just like the United States. Latin America as well. Everything is literally just red across the board. Middle East and Africa also very, very negative. Asia and Australia, kind of run through the list here since I know you guys are listening on the podcast as well. And just for the record, if you guys want to see the YouTube video, just look up Marcello Trader or, you know, Marcello Arrambide Trader. It should come up automatically on YouTube. And for those of you guys that are listening or watching on YouTube, you can listen to it as well. Just look up Day Trading Academy on all the Spotify's and everything. You should be able to pull it up. Bitcoin and cryptocurrency news this week. We've had a collapse of almost 30%. It did get down to just under 20,000. As I looked at the charts just now here on Saturday, it's down 55. Well, let's just round it off, 56% or so far this year. That's not really crazy amount of news for Bitcoin, right? So most of you guys still don't invest in Bitcoin, and these kind of big moves are normal for Bitcoin. Next week, it could go up 20%, right? That's not really a big deal. The big deal now that I see with this is we're starting to see a fracture in the system where we're starting to see companies collapse. Right, we saw the crypto Luna collapse. He's getting sued too, allegedly. Right? He did something wrong, allegedly. Everything's allegedly until proven right. Johnny Depp, go jump for Johnny Depp, for men everywhere. No, but it's important to realize that because the crypto space doesn't have regulation, there's a lot of more funny business that goes on, and that's why I always told you guys I'm not interested in Bitcoin. I think blockchain is the future with the government coins. There was big news this week with the Federal Reserve talking about how they should have the servers ready by 2023, right? And so it's not that it's not going to continue to exist. It's like I always mention to you guys, it's going to go up, it's going to go down. I have no doubt it'll probably make more record highs, but there's other investments that you can make that are just as good. So just keep that in mind. Michael Saylor's MicroStrategy. If you guys don't know, the company MicroStrategy literally borrowed billions of dollars to be able to invest in Bitcoin. They're currently at a $1.6 billion unrealized loss, while they still have the position open. Ko Do Kwon, which is the founder of the Luna and the stable coin that collapsed, supposedly, allegedly, he sold $2.7 billion cashing out from Luna before the collapse after it went down to zero. Peter Thiel, which backs a crypto lending BlockFi It's a company called BlockFi. It's cutting about 20% of its staff as they reckon with the downturn in digital currencies and heightened concerns about the weakening economy. Coinbase Global is also letting go. They're the largest crypto exchange in all of the US. They're letting go about 18% of their workforce. They're citing the collapse in crypto prices overall. They're the largest exchange I mentioned in the US with about 5,000 employees. And then we have a Celsius, a crypto firm called Celsius, which has $12 billion reportedly of customer assets and about 1.7 million customers, are pausing withdrawals and transfers. You see what I mean? This is like the kind of stuff that doesn't happen in the stock market or with a bank. And if it does happen, literally the financial system is collapsed. So you literally have worse things to worry about. But that's what I always told you guys, just to be careful in the Bitcoin space, because it's not that you can't make money, but obviously high risk means high rewards, but obviously there's risk involved as well. Do Kwon dismissing the allegations about the $2.7 billion liquidation that he says for Luna. As I mentioned, Coinbase is being sued as well because they supposedly didn't talk about the risks of investing in Luna and UST. And even Elon Musk is being sued because supposedly he had a Dogecoin pyramid scheme. Literally when he appeared on Saturday Night Live was the peak of Dogecoin. And so all him and his companies are getting sued for, I think, $258 billion. And Binance, which is the largest exchange in the world for crypto, they paused withdrawals for several hours on Monday due to a quote unquote stuck transaction causing a backlog. That just doesn't sound right to me. They just stopped withdrawals because of a quote unquote stuck transaction. Like, really? See what I mean? This is the kind of stuff that just doesn't. Conspiracy theory, Marcello says. Doesn't smell right. Commodities, Russian crude flows are now going through a new route because they're starting to sell more in places like Asia after the West is starting to try to block them out. 50% of the exports from Russia are now going to Asia, which obviously a big block of that being China and India. China, if you didn't know, is the biggest importer of oil in the world. India is now the second largest destination for shipments for Russian oil. And it's something that's important because we have a little bit of a fracture in kind of the world order, so to speak, where we have a situation where India is a ally of the US. And so if they're an ally of the US, essentially they should supposedly do what the US says. And obviously the US and Europe have talked about these sanctions, and India has kind of gone a different way and said, no, our country still needs oil, so we're going to buy it from Russia. We're not going to sanction Russia, which is part of the reason why I think that all of these sanctions and things aren't really going to do anything for Russia, due to the fact that the world needs Russian oil, especially after this administration is locking down the United States production after the last administration created what was the U.S. was the biggest producer of oil in the world. Remember that as soon as Biden got in, he shut down the Keystone Pipeline. He shut down other projects as well. And one of the things I found super ironic is the Biden administration is quietly urging companies to purchase Russian fertilizer, tongue twister, over fears of sanctions would lead to sharp drop in supplies, contributing to the ongoing spiraling global food costs. So let me get this right. We're going to publicly talk bad about Russia. We're going to sanction them, blah, 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 blah. But don't forget to go buy their fertilizer because we might help in reducing the cost of food. See how that works? So we're literally continuing to still pay them to continue their oh-so-wrong war in Ukraine. Democrat Senator Ron Wyden is proposing a surtax that would mean that oil companies would have to pay 42% federal taxes depending on their profit margin. And this I find to be super ironic because it's literally a transfer of wealth from you and I, the poor people, like the serfs, to all the rich people and the elite. So watch how this works. They cut down all the domestic production to save the environment, because obviously other countries producing more oil helps the environment in the US, right? So we shut down the US production. Then we go to literally dictatorships and crazy people like Venezuela and Iran and have them sell us more oil instead of us paying somebody like Canada for it, for example. And then because of the problem that they created with the oil, right? Because it's literally been created not from the Ukraine war. It started when Biden came in and he shut down the Keystone Pipeline and other projects when it come to oil production, because under the last administration, we literally became the largest producer of oil in the world, right? So they create the problem, oil prices spike, and then they charge the oil companies more taxes. So literally they're taking the money out of our pockets and then they're giving it to themselves. This time, I mean, the corruption, and I think it's corruption in the capital and the US government is kind of obvious at this point, right? Biggest transfer of wealth in history. Russia is stepping up the use of energy as a geopolitical weapon. It's making further cuts to its natural gas shipments to Europe. Russia, remember, the fourth largest economy in the world, uses quite a bit of Russian natural gas and Russia oil. They're cutting their exports to Germany by 60%, and Italy, which is the second biggest user of natural gas in Russia, they are cutting the production or the shipments to Italy by 15%. So if it's not a recession that's going to get us, it's literally going to be just the lack of supplies, right? Because we have this huge supply problem as well. US crude went down by over 10% to 109.56. Brent went down by over 7% to 113.12. And due to the fact that the Federal Reserve decided to raise interest rates a lot higher than what they expected, and it surprised the market, the precious metals actually went down as well, because remember, most commodities are priced in dollars. So anytime if they raise the rates, then people want dollars. So the demand goes up and the value for the dollar goes up. So that means that everything listed in dollars is going to go down in value because the value of the dollar is going up. It's an inverse relationship. So that's why precious metals went down this week. Gold is down 1.76% to 1840, while silver, my favorite market of all, is down 1.24% to 2174. Inflation reported by the government in the financial and banking news is at 8.6%. If they were still calculating the inflation the same way that they used it in the 1970s, actual inflation would be twice that, which is 17%. Now, year over year increase in consumer products, for example, utility cost, gas, food at home, electric components, went up by 25.7% year over year, which is just under the peak of history, the record high in 1980. So let's kind of put this together. The value of the things that we pay for are going up by 25.7%, but the government is only telling us that the inflation is going up by 8.6%. Don't let the government fool you. Conspiracy Marcello says, the preppers were right. Other than that, Americans are now having an extra bill of $460 a month. That works out to $5,500 a year due to the silent tax that is inflation. U.S. short-term treasury rates jumped on Monday. So the treasuries are the loans, the debt that the U.S. government takes. So they have different lengths of time. We have a 2-year bond, we have a 10-year bond. And when they actually invert, traders say it's a bit of an indicator of what a recession is going to be coming, and that just happened where they're inverted. So theoretically, we should be walking into a recession if this indicator is correct. German inflation accelerated to a 5-decade high of 5.9%. Again, energy and food prices. U.S. mortgage rates jumped sharply this week, the most since 1987. This is big news because if the consumer spending is almost 70% of the economy, the housing market is in between about 17 to 19%. We can call it just 20% or 18%, for example. So 90% of the economy now is literally on its way down. Not bueno. The Fed rate rose the interest rates by 75 basis points or 0.75. That's why basically we had this huge rise in the interest rates for mortgages. China dropped their treasury holdings by $36 billion. They're at about $1.003 trillion. It's probably aiming on diversifying their foreign exchange holdings. They probably know that the US dollar is most likely going to collapse in the future. Bank of England hiked its interest rates for the 5th time since December. They're at 1.25, and even the Swiss National Bank is surprised by raising their interest rates as well. And that's part of the reason why we're seeing this huge drop in absolutely everything, because we've literally been in a bubble since 2008, 2009. When governments around the world decided to lower interest rates since the lowest in history and then inject capital into the economy, now they're starting to take all that out. So now everything that's been inflated is starting to come back down. Eurozone inflation rose to a record high of 8.1%. More than 4 times the ECB's target. Again, 39% increase in the rise in energy costs was the main driver of inflation. Not a lot of political news so far this week, other than the fact that I just saw a news report that Biden fell off a bike somewhere in Delaware. Economic news, U.S. wholesale prices rose at its rapid pace in May. It rose 0.8%, being a 10.8% rise year over year. And this number is important because if we have consumer prices going up by 8.6%, but the wholesale prices to produce the goods and services is at 10.8%, that means that rise of 10.8% is higher than what we're paying now. So the cost of produce the things that we're paying for is going to continue to go up. Commerce Department saying that the retail sales fell by 0.3% after rising after the last 5 months. So that's almost 70% of the economy. And the Federal Reserve is expecting the U.S. economy to grow at almost half what they projected. They always do this. They say, well, the economy is going to grow this much this year. And then they literally just drop it throughout the year because they never get anything right. And if you guys remember, the head of the central bank in the United States before the crisis in 2008, literally the week before, he said, everything's fine. The housing market looks great. And then we had the worst collapse in the housing market in history. So don't listen to these fools because they're not telling you the truth. They're just telling you what you want to hear. Corporate news, Alibaba and a lot of the tech companies in China collapsed. They are now reporting that the last over 12 months, their profits have remained mostly the same. They're not increasing. Caterpillar, which is a huge manufacturing giant in the United States, is another one of the companies that is moving from the socialist paradise of Illinois to the new capitalist paradise of Texas. They're saying that it's because they want to be able to attract new talent. You wouldn't be able to find that in Illinois and Chicago. See, everybody else is moving to a lot of the Sun Belt states because less regulation, less taxes, more capitalism. Few SpaceX employees were aghast when Elon Musk started reporting that he's going to support Republicans for the first time. And they wrote a letter and at least five of them have been fired. Trade news, Ukrainian grain shippers have rerouted a lot of their shipments through rail and land to go through EU ports. Remember that Russia, due to the war, is not allowing anything out of the ports from Ukraine. And remember that Russia and Ukraine together are some of the biggest grain exports in the world. International events, Ukraine has received a promise of continued strong support from Britain. Don't forget to buy the Russia fertilizer. Palestine militants fired a rocket over the city of Israel as well. Israel said that Hamas, which is the Islamist militant group which controls Gaza, fired the rockets. And last but not least, the world's wealthiest individuals have been hit with losses after the stock market collapse. The 500 richest people lost $206 billion on Monday, a total of $1.4 trillion since the start of 2022. And the world's top 5 wealthiest individuals lost over $345 billion this year. Top 5 wealthiest people being Elon Musk from Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink. Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon. Bernard Arnault is number 3, which he owns the company that owns all of those fashion houses out of France, for example, like Louis Vuitton. The worst person in the world, Bill Gates, is number 4. This guy's so lucky with his investments, right? He invested vaccines. Oh, we got a pandemic. Now we have a baby food shortage. Oh, he invested in synthetic baby food formula. This guy can't lose. What a great businessman. Taking off the conspiracy theory hat now. And Warren Buffett is at number 5. That's the news, guys, for this week. Let me know if you have any questions. Don't forget the like button. That hasn't gone up in price just yet. And if you have any questions, hit it with the hashtag #AskMarcello. See you next week.